Environmental and animal protection groups have filed a request with the federal government for a review of poisons that are used to control predators in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Usually these are used to control wolves, for instance, around livestock groups, but increasingly to control predators that prey on caribou, which is a big issue in the oil and gas industry. And we're going to be talking to Kaitlyn Mitchell, who's the staff lawyer for Animal Justice. And so welcome to the interview, Kaitlyn.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, you filed a request because under the Federal Pest Control Products Act, you're asking Health Canada to review products that contain strychnine, compound 1080, sodium cyanide. These are used to poison wolves, and there are all sorts of problems. So can you tell us a little bit about the legal challenge on this, or the legal request that you filed?
Certainly. So under the Pest Control Products Act, and specifically there's one section, Section 17, you can ask the minister to conduct what's known as a special review. So that is, she would conduct a review because there are reasonable grounds to believe that the environmental risks of a product are unacceptable, the health risks of a product are unacceptable, or that the value of the products are unacceptable. So that is, they're not effective. They don't do what they're intended to do. So what we say is that all three of those factors warrant a special review here. We're talking about indiscriminate poisons placed in ecosystems that cause horrible suffering. I don't think that anyone would even dispute that. Strychnine and compound 1080 in particular have been called out by the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association and other bodies because they cause such severe and prolonged suffering in animals. And again, they're indiscriminate. So once you put these poisons into the environment, you really can't control who else is going to eat them. So, they're used to target coyotes, wolves, black bears in some circumstances. But once they're out there, non-target animals consume them as well. They can consume the baits, or they can consume the poison bodies of other victims. And actually, the evidence suggests that more non-target animals are killed than target animals. So we say that the environmental risks in particular are really just unacceptable, and the minister needs to conduct a special review.
Okay, so you're asking the minister to intervene here. Has this been done before? Is there any precedent for this, or is this a brand new request?
Well, it's a new request. Requests for review have been filed under the Act before, but this is a unique request, I think, because we are asking the minister to look at all three poisons. We say that the risks that they pose are similar and that their value is similarly just low and unacceptable. So we want her to look at all three of these products, all three of these poisons, and ideally cancel the registration of these products in Canada. I can't see a way that she could change label requirements, for instance, to make the risks acceptable. It just seems that, that's been done before. We've tinkered with label requirements, and yet we see that, the products continue to be used in an irresponsible manner that's causing widespread death and suffering throughout ecosystems.
Now, the government of Alberta is part of this because you've obtained some of their records. And one of the things I understand that it shows is that government of Alberta employees are putting out the bait, and then they do no follow-up. So they don't know who ate which animals ate the bait, which animals then perhaps consumed the animals that ate the bait, and that poison then gets into the ecosystem, and there's just no monitoring. I mean, nobody really knows, how this is going. So what are you asking of the Alberta government?
So our requests are focused on the federal government, but what I would say to the Alberta government is this, first of all, I don't think they should be using the poisons in the first place. It's only Alberta and Saskatchewan that are registering these products for use. Everyone else has backed away from them for a good reason. So, our request are framed for the federal government, but in the meantime, I would certainly hope that Alberta would take a look at what they're doing and the evidence behind it, which is really lacking. But at a very, very minimum, if you're going to use very, very strong lethal poisons in an ecosystem, you've got to follow the label requirements. And that's not just me saying that, that's the law saying that. So at the very, very least, I would hope that Alberta would step up its game and make sure that when these poisons are being put out into the environment, into the ecosystem, that staff are monitoring them. And, I should say that in a lot of circumstances, it's actually landholders that are using them when we look at use of poisons to protect livestock or allegedly protect livestock. And so more monitoring needs to be done there too. So as I said, I don't think that more monitoring is enough, but at a minimum, you've got to follow legal requirements.
So is there an argument to be made here that in fact the Alberta government is breaking federal rules and regulations?
Yeah, in our request, what we've said is this. I think that the answer is yes, potentially, in two ways. So first, we have laws that protect animals from unnecessary suffering. And those exist in all provinces, but they create exemptions. So, generally accepted pest control product use would be one of them. But if you're not using these products in a way that is legal or generally accepted, then I say, that the act applies, and that any distress and death caused to animals is actually a violation of provincial laws. And we also have endangered species laws, federally, the Species at Risk Act. Killing an endangered species, even if you do so inadvertently, is a violation of that statute. And, again, it's hard to track the death that goes on in an ecosystem once these products are put out there, but we do have evidence to show that sometimes it's species at risk that consume these baits or consume the poisoned bodies of other animals.
So if your application to the federal government your request is turned down, then what's the next step? Do you sue the federal government, sue the Alberta government? Where do you go from here, if assuming the request is not granted?
Yeah, so I hate to give you a cagey lawyer answer because we're notorious for that, but my answer is basically at that point we'd have to assess our options. There would be the option to ask the court to review the minister's decision if she were to turn down the request. I do think that the evidence is very, very strong, so it would be hard to think of a justification for not reviewing these poisons. Or we could look at situations where there's evidence of provincial or federal laws being broken when these pesticides are put out in a manner that's not in compliance with the label requirements, and we could think about legal action there. So I hope it doesn't come to that, though. I really hope that the federal government takes these requests seriously and reviews these products and really looks at the science, because the science just isn't there. There's no justification for continuing to use these poisons in Canada.
Kaitlyn, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.